everyone, my name is Chanel Newnham, and this week we read chapters 9 and chapters 10. Chapter 9 was about delivering and using language. A main idea that stood out to me was the 4 methods of speaking. The first method is extemporaneously speaking. That is having lots of preparation. For example, like the speeches we give for this class, we make note cards, we practice, and then we film ourselves. The second type of speaking is manuscript. Manuscript is when you have your speeches written out for you. For example, a lot of public figures, and politicians, they have their speeches written out for them before they say them. The third type is impromptu speaking. This is speaking, giving a speech with no preparation at all. For example, if you're in class and your teacher calls on you and says, "Chanel, please tell me about yourself." Obviously, you haven't prepared for that. You had no idea that was going to happen, so you're speaking off the top of your head. And the last method of speaking is reciting from memory. A lot of actors in theaters do this. A couple things that I learned were body language and how important it is to you, and eye contact. Making eye contact with your audience is very important. It lets them know that you're confident, that you're engaged. It also keeps them engaged. You don't want to just sit there and stare at a paper. Your audience won't gain anything from that. You also want to remember the volume of your voice. You don't want to whisper like this. You don't want to talk too loud. You can either scare your audience, or they may not pay attention if you're talking too quiet because they can't hear you. You also want to pay attention to the pitch of your voice when you're giving a speech. You don't want to talk monotone. You don't want to, talk way up here. You just want to talk in a nice, even pitch. You also want to be cautious of all the pauses that you have in your speech. You're allowed to pause, but you don't want to take too long of a pause or too short of a pause. That's not always good. And also how you pronounce words is very important so your audience understands what exactly you're trying to say, the words that you're using. I can use, all of these methods of speaking, knowing them, knowing how important body language is to my audience, the volume of my voice, the pitch of my voice, just all these things. I can use these in all my classes, not just this class, all the classes that I have to give speeches or presentations in. Same with, later on, whenever I have a job, I'm working in an office and I have to show all my employees something, I can use this. In chapter 10, we learned about visual aids and presentation. We learned about how important visual aids are. Visual aids can be graphic pictures, they can be PowerPoints with different slides, it can be an object, it could be a chart showing statistics, it could be pretty much anything. Whenever you have a visual aid, you want to make sure your visual aid is big enough that it stands out to the audience and that they can read it. You want to make sure that your colors do not clash, that they can still see it. For example, PowerPoint, you don't want to have dark red on black, a black background. You don't want to have that. Your audience would have a hard time seeing that. What I learned in chapter 10 is about Powtoons and Prezi. I had no idea what those two were. Never heard of them. Prezi is a large screen instead of, different PowerPoints like PowerPoint. And it lets you highlight your text or your images. Powtoons, it's animated presentations, and it allows you sometimes to have background music in your presentation if you ever need that for different classes. Both of those are free, to download and to sign up for. So those will be pretty interesting to use. I can use, those in different classes, not just this class. Every single class you have to do presentations, speeches, anything like that. So, I may download Prezi and try and use that. The main thing that I really did learn throughout this chapter was just how important visual aids were. I didn't know that they were that important. I knew that we had to have them, but it's so important. It, shows your main point, what you're trying to talk about. And the one thing I really want to say is do not rely on technology. Always have a backup. That is so important. It said that in chapter 10. It is so important.